Good evening or good afternoon, wherever you're based in the world. It is a pleasure to be here today with John and Sam from Nanome and to learn a bit about what was their journey when porting this incredible app to mixed reality, the decision they've made, the challenges they have encountered. So, guys, it is really a real pleasure to be here. And before we start to introduce our guest, I also would like to remind, and I'm going to say it also later on while people come over, to actually let's say interfere, not interfere, but intervene with questions. And in general, this is, let's say, the great advantage of being here together, that you can actually always ask questions to the party, to Sam or John. So while we wait, we give the floor to them. I mean, I would be curious where some of the people that are joining come from. Are you from the US? Are you from the my side of the world, let's say Europe? But meanwhile, while I'm getting to know a little bit about that, let's why you guys don't introduce a little bit about yourself. John, you want to go first?
Sure. My name's John Hanacek. I am the XR Interaction Designer at Nanome. So I'm responsible for all the details of the user interactions, meshing with the application so that it's a nice, coherent user experience. And I also research kind of future methods or kind of wacky other possibilities just to make sure that we have a really wide perspective on not only providing the value right now, but then also where this technology is going in the future.
So indeed, I mean, I think it's a continuously evolving field. There are new headsets, new technology, new way of interacting, new capabilities that are unlocked. So there is indeed a lot of always continuous novelty coming up. And Sam, what about you?
Sure. Just quick background on like what Nanome is, because it's kind of relevant. But
Of
yeah,
course.
we're a collaborative application for structure-based drug design in virtual and augmented reality. So what that means is essentially molecular modeling. Think like AutoCAD or some of those more advanced toolings that you would basically use that scientists would use for developing new drugs and molecules. And so we work with a lot of early stage R&D, pharmaceutical and biotech companies. And our end users are essentially scientists that are like making cancer drugs. My background's actually in software. I'm a co-founder and CTO of Nanome, but my background's in software and also machine learning. And my kind of responsibilities are mostly the product design and engineering team at Nanome, building the product.
Awesome. And I mean, it is a topic that is very dear to me. Some of people might not know, but in my previous life, I studied biotechnology. I've got a PhD in industrial biotechnology. So when thinking about these molecules and all the i- crazy amount of number of enzymatic tests I've run, doing affinity testing or ELISA or so on, I always that comes to mind. And if I says like, and if now back then I'm thinking, hey, I can actually see the molecule now in real life in front of me, and I could see how the binding site look. If I make a mutation, then I could see how that affected. So indeed, that's how it looks like. And I think it's not just the visualization. That is also another important aspect. There is a lot of also simulation and much more that goes just, okay, you have a static thing in front of you. No, I think that is another important aspect. So, and we do have some people joining in. Hey, it is a pleasure. We have Rakesh from the UK. And we also have Sophia Chen tuning in from the Netherlands, Convivial Studio from New Mexico, and we also have people from Turkey, I do believe. So Fernando from San Diego. So we started gathering people. So as I will remember, I will remind people also during the session, do not hesitate to actually pop in and indeed ask questions. So before we start and dive deeper into actually Nanome, their process and their journey into porting to MetaQuest Pro, being indeed like you guys one of the launch app, especially of course the given focus for productivity, collaboration and work. I think that Nanome is just like shines at one of the very ultra let's say um, uh, how do you call it, specialized app, right? I mean it is really up there, one of the most, I believe. So I wanted to tell you briefly why we got connected. So I believe that this webinar is hosted by us, Shapes XR. We are design and prototyping tool, and we met because John was one of the first the people that started using Shape to do what? To actually design, prototype, sketch spatial experiences, and then share them with the team. So that is indeed the strength of one of the strengths of Shape, and we're going to talk about it. And it's the fact that thanks to this stage system that you're going to see we are going to see this evening, you are able to tell a story, and whatever that story might be an interaction, might be like a user flow, maybe it's like different variants of sketch of an environment. So there is indeed a lot of capabilities that you're going to say. So I invite everybody that is joining to go on the Meta Store, download Shapes, and try it out and experience and play, because that's one of the most important things. So, but meanwhile, we got more people from Nigeria. Hi, Daniel. It's a pleasure to have you. Pakistan, Hafiz. We also have Sean from Hamburg. So we have more and more people tuning in. So, guys, prepare your questions. I'm going to start with my first questions, right, to the guys at Nanome. So, why port Nanome to mixed reality? Right? I mean, so when you started making that decision, what were the factors that you evaluated? Why doing it? What were the challenge that you expected to encounter?
Yeah, originally, the long-term vision is that we're going to have a really robust augmented reality interface in the future, but the technology is not quite there yet. So kind of build with what we have. And it's been early stage of the company was really focused around, very early VR. Like, you have base stations, you have low resolution headsets. But, one of the things that really kind of switched us over and kind of thinking it's more and more about the future of being closer with MR was I actually got to try the Vario back when it was a prototype at AWS with my co-founder Kata and then also Palmer Luckey. And we got to try it out. And that was like the highest definition resolution experience I got to try. And it wasn't even an MR. But then down the line, one of our employees was kind of gung-ho on getting an XR3 no matter what. And so we got it. And then that MR experience was beautiful. And that kind of painted the picture of like what's coming next. And it's like, well, AR is not quite here, but there's something intermediate that's MR and it's right around the corner. And so that was really exciting. But then ultimately, the straw on the camel's back was, we've been in a B2B kind of ISV partner with Meta for a while. And they approached us as an early launch title and getting prototypes of the Quest Pro, and kind of tricked off the full kind of switch over for MR.
Right. And I think it's like this for many people. So mixed reality sounds like as a first step towards a full augmented reality once technology, and of course that is all part of the learning process. So I'm actually curious from the people that are joining here in the session, are you guys involved in any mixed reality? Do you mostly work on augmented reality or virtual reality? So please let's ask your own question. And we already have a question actually from Lucas Cotto, designer at Microsoft. He's asking, is the goal of Nanome to be mostly an AR application in the future? And what are the use cases that AR will enable to Nanome users that VR can't provide?
Yeah, great question. Actually, there's both use cases available. I don't see a world where we're a primarily AR or VR and exclusively or. But there's a bunch of reasons where you want an AR experience, especially co-located AR, kind of that future holodeck kind of experience where like I am a scientist with other scientists in a physical location, and I can have these structures like almost hologrammed in front of me that I can interact with in real time. But then I personally use a lot of things where if I'm in a smaller group, I'll have MR on and they'll be in my kitchen. But if I have like 10, 15 people, I actually prefer VR just so that it's like less disruptive and they're not like outside my window because it's not true spatial computing yet and that such. So there's a balance of both. We don't really have a strong intuition on both, but a lot of people really like the idea of MR a lot more and AR a lot more than VR because that enclosed space sometimes makes people a little anxious.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you've seen also people sometimes not feeling scared, especially the first people that explore this, being completely disconnected from the world has an impact, right? You are there, you look stupid, you're wearing this, you don't know what is happening around you. Well, instead, while doing that in mixed reality, you still have control of your surrounding, and that gives you a feeling of safety. In a sense, when compared to be fully isolated. We do have actually another question that is a little on the same line from Sean. What was the original motivation behind the idea of being an AR application in the first place? I believe there was a VR application in the first place, but what was the perceived benefit I had of VR? Maybe Sean, could you also elaborate, or maybe Sam? You guys got the question. Can answer.
I understand the question. I mean, I think the general hypothesis is, Jarvis for molecules in 2050, right? Like there's an aspect of spatial computing, like whether it's AR or VR. So like I don't consider us like an AR application. I don't consider us a VR application. Like I consider us a spatial computing application. And it just so happens there's two different interpretation of mediums for that.
Yeah. And I think the people, go please.
Oh, just really quick, I think something one of our earliest users said one time was sometimes it's like going into the VR is like diving into that pool. You're going to go in there and there's nothing else in the world that you care about except for your structure, which you're becoming more and more entangled with the more you are perceiving it right in this space. And then there's also a lot of meetings that go on, a lot of collaboration that goes on with a mixture of physical. And so like, I think to echo what Sam is saying is we don't really see it as like these two discrete modes. It's just an opportunity space of all the hardware, and you're giving the user something for the right occasion. They have the right perception for the right occasion, the right background for the right moment. It gives them more options. So it's something we're exploring, but not well, we'll get more into this later when we talk about it.
Yeah. Indeed, and actually, it's good to see people that are venturing this as well. So Jeffrey, for example, started building our app for HoloLens, then ported to Quest, and now currently exporting blending into MR using pass-through. That sounds like actually the kind of opposite of what you guys did, right? So we're starting from Quest and then moving more towards this mixed world. So Jeffrey, thanks for sharing, and I'm curious about anybody else who has actually ventured into this. What was your learning? What was your experience? It is great actually to be here and share this. And maybe while you guys gather some idea, why not ask Sam and John? So how was the process? You got let's say you got this conversation started with Meta. We can be ISV, guys. We get this new cool headset. What do you have? Can we start working? You say yes. Then what's next? What was the process? Can you guide us through this journey? Let's say.
Yes. Right. So after that moment, then we need to do it. So Sam's handling all that and setting our direction scope and saying, here we go. And now, okay, what can we do with this? These are big affordances. So in the beginning, I'm just going to try and like walk you through the history, which we were doing some archaeology of. And in the start, you're going to support the feature completely, and that brings stuff like co-located MR and other complexities about kind of how you're going to merge the realities together and things like this. So first, classic, I got to go do a bunch of research, see what people have already done. I personally have a strong background in the Magic Leap HoloLens type of world, so this was also an interesting kind of flip. But there's key differences in the medium. So looking at other ways that people have done pass-through, and then taking really strong stock of the current VR application, because Nanome is a well-loved, used application already, and we need to make sure that we're not breaking anything. So a lot of like little details need to be accounted for when you change the medium from an infinite virtual space to something that's the size of an average room. And then there was a lot of there became a lot of discussion around merging these contexts between the real world, which the headset can be oriented toward, and the virtual world where the users can move around. And in a purely virtual experience, you just have that one context. So when you bring it into MR, you have this other context. You have two forwards, was our joke that kind of emerged, is that we were doing a lot of exploration of how we're going to get the coordinate spaces to line up. So if someone's in MR and somebody's in VR, they're going to have to be able to see the same thing and do the same thing. So I've started building a lot of shapes prototypes, at different fidelities, and then we could go and explore them. Then at one point, reporting with Sam, this is like something where there's only a few of us at the company that are completely aware of what's going on. So there was definitely people looking at us like we were the Charlie Day meme when we're like trying to explain about two forwards, It's a really hard concept to explain.
So guys, this mixed reality is like making you mad or something. You're too forward.
it makes you a little mad. So luckily we had, some shapes prototypes, and we could basically just walk through it and explore it. But we also needed to use a lot of kind of top down perspective too, to just get a handle on really high level conceptually. How is this working? So it's that mixture between, experiencing the content or experiencing the rules that we're trying to lay out in terms of getting these worlds to sync up, because the Nanome has a floor that you can hop around on, and then that floor is larger than the space that you have most of the time.
Right.
And then you can reset the orientation of the thing. So you can reset the orientation of the device, and you can reset the orientation of your floor. So and then along the way we're cutting stuff to where there's co-located MR, for example, and other deeper things where we are able to, by experiencing it in the Shapes XR, we just kind of iterated it down to the core of what would make this work. And then it was great to be able to kind of bring in engineering along the way, but not have them waste a ton of effort trying to simulate anything, because we could simulate it, and I could just go in there with our UX engineer or our one of our other engineers to just show them, and not have to kind of try and explain this so much. Then we can test it again with a focused prototype that's exactly solving something validating an assumption or something that we already tested by the Shapes prototype.
Right. And I think this is also so important because, in all honesty, also for all people that are listening, per se, switching on pass-through and being mixed reality, also from a development perspective, is fairly easy, right? This is one of the first things that we also did. We can switch it on, and then what, right? Because that's the first thing that you guys tried Shapes on, was Shapes where pass-through was on. Right. And that was basically it, because our first iteration, so there were a lot of, let's say, things that were not optimized, but we pushed it out so that we could see and we could learn also from our user, from guys like you. But that's the moment it's like, okay, now I'm mixed reality. Oh, local motion. That is a big one. And I think that we also encountered similar problems, and other apps have others. And then more, right? So then it becomes first locomotion, and then becomes many other factors that being, for example, co-located. So there are indeed a lot of layers, and having a good mixed reality experience requires thought, and it requires a lot of design. And I think it's great to hear actually this story from you. And maybe out of curiosity, so what was that is so you mentioned about locomotion, and what else? So were there other things that maybe you were not expecting, and you say, oh, right, this is not gonna work in mixed reality? Maybe that you can share with our audience, from which they could actually learn.
Yes, but I think the primary thing that emerged was just how complex the concept of locomotion is inverted. When you're moving through virtual space, that's a thing that's valid. But when you move virtual space or virtual things while you're in mixed reality, it's as if they're moving. So,
right.
So a lot of it, there's other challenges that we went through, we added meta avatar support and other things. So we had to kind of move some of the environments around, or some of the user interfaces around, sizing all the menus and things, and bringing stuff closer to the user. You're no longer doing more of a billboard, you're kind of changing it. But those things are those were fairly discoverable or knowable by kind of experiencing the app, turning on pass-through, and kind of seeing what's going on, the existing Nanome. It's when we got into the really trying to make sure it integrated, using the Shapes rooms, that was the bulk of this challenge, which was kind of an unknown in terms of just how much extra that it is when you're coming from a existing context. It's probably easier to start over or start fresh, but in this case we're merging these two worlds. So I'm just going to keep iterating that really was, from my perspective, most of what we were working on. And yes, it took a lot of iteration to get it right, and a lot of attempts. I have some material that can kind of show some of it if you want to.
Of course, of course. And while we do this, I mean, I think it would be also curious to know how also maybe Sam saw this kind of like from the outside a bit, right? So there is a design challenge. Like, how were you also involved? But please, John, start sharing. I mean, let me get the thing on screen, and then you can get full screen. But maybe guide us through the story, and I will be curious also to know how the team started collaborating, and engineers, maybe the product manager, maybe Sam himself. So it's always fascinating to see how these different expertise kind of like start colliding in a way. And of course, again, I want to remind everybody that has questions regarding the process, regarding technology, regarding design, regarding product, please go ahead and ask. More than happy to share them with John and Sam.
So from my perspective, just kind of tuning in here, yeah, I mean, ultimately, like, it was a lot of back and forth. I would say that double plus one on, if you're starting from ground zero, just making an MR app, it's much easier. We have like 5+ years of development of this application. It's heavily used by scientists. The release cycle is not like I push it and find out, because you'll piss off a bunch of scientists. And so we have to be really careful on like what we actually do, is the product is a lot more mature in the market. And so trying to port it, like really trying to make it fit and work. And so it not only does it have to work well as just pure MR, I'm alone, but it's a collaborative application. It's got to work well remote. Where the content shows up needs to be a lot closer to you. Before, in like an infinite room, you can kind of just run around an infinite space. But that would mean that I'm like in my neighbor's house at that point, functionally in MR. And in my perspective, I'm looking like 10 steps ahead. We're cross platforms or cross device. The concept of like an automated calibration, like shared spatial anchors versus a manual calibration, both need to be options in our future tech stack. And so when we first started kind of diving into this, it's like, okay, well, we want to make sure that we can actually have these co-located experience, because MR is cool, but like MR co-located is going to be awesome. And that's the future, right? So how do we do, like, we're just thinking so many steps ahead. We're trying to fit all these puzzle pieces together. And it was mind burning. And so we actually had to do a lot of simplification down and say, okay, let's ignore this, let's simplify this. And we did a lot of 2D projections of like physical space, where like the MetaQuest Pro, like actual boundaries were, and then where Nanome's front facing things were. And we did a bunch of different things with where content was placed. And so me and John kind of dialing it down to where it's a little bit more interesting. So I'm both, founder-led product management and also like engineering. So I was able to become that first pass filter for a majority of like those back and forths to set the direction. But then when we started getting it closer, we would bring in like 2 of our engineers. One was a UI UX engineer. One of them was backend, like a strong backend engineer, just because to adapt it to like our system that's pretty mature.
Awesome. And I do have a question about that co-located aspect. I'm curious, but first, John, maybe you can share some of the visual, and then of course, guys, for anybody, at some point we're also going to go in shapes together, so to show some of their design, some of their choices, and the challenges they've encountered. So stay with us. But John, go ahead.
I mean, I think I maybe can take through, maybe you can take us through a little bit more of like just a classic like how it went down, or how the role of kind of the design and development, because that's what I meant earlier as well with what Sam's saying. By sometimes it was just he and I understood what was going on, and so these things were really essential, but also mapping it was really essential. So okay, here you go, research. We did a lot of research. There's a lot of really novel ways of approaching this, and there's a lot of really novel ways of doing it. And remember, the mixed reality with pass-through is a very different thing than mixed reality with see-through or waveguide type displays. So we had to make sure. And then you got to make it logic. So like this is just some of the various like Fig Jam style conspiracy looking. No, I mean, it's actually pretty clear, right? You have to just account for everything of what mode you're in and what kind of options you're going to give people. And we ended up basically creating this edit layout paradigm where, in order to gate the teleportation, because if you teleport an MR, it's really really intense, because you're moving everything and there's no reference that you moved. So we really had to distill it to, how are we going to try and handle accidental inputs and make sure people know what they're doing. So then, a lot of yeah, like I mentioned the side quests down below of wrist menus. So there's a lot of like other little aspects and shapes that we did of like kind of move. It used to be inside a wrist. Now we're going to move it up and get some ergonomic improvements. This video here, it's a little choppy, but this is like an early problem solving session in our office of like labeling behind, labeling front, and then hitting that recenter button on your devices, which is like this weird thing that the XR industry is in, where we have sort of a standard, right? It's available on a lot of mixed reality type of things, and it's baked into the operating system, so you have to account for it. So you can't just escape. You know, you can't say, "Oh, I'll just use my coordinate system." Well, the headset has its own. So there was a lot of that, of back and forth and testing how it could be co-located, because with shapes mixed reality, you can simulate pretty much the whole user experience at least, which is great. And then boiling it down though to, okay, at the fundamental level, I've got some people are going to be in there. I need to go over there, but I'm not going over anywhere. I'm moving them to me, but I am going somewhere in my context. So you can see why top-down type of diagrams actually ended up helping us a lot. This is kind of like a mid top-down, but we made some really abstract top-down diagrams just to square those two coordinate systems.
Right. And maybe also for people to understand what they're seeing right now. So these are all like recreation done in 3D using shapes, some imported assets, and using the stage system that allow you to like frame of a storyboard to actually move from one to another. So here we say 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm going to go in and I'm going to show you. You can actually simulate those interactions. And when you're in mixed reality, you can simulate those interactions when you are actually in mixed reality. So something we're going to show, but that is, so what you're seeing here was all built fully in VR and then using that kind of like animated as a stop motion.
Yeah, exactly. So, and you can kind of see an earlier one where we're experimenting, I'm experimenting with materials for things and behaviors and stuff like this. And then it gets into, it looks pretty close to the actual software. And then since it's all, this black here, imagine this is pass through.
Yeah, indeed.
Pictures per se, but yeah, so we can, you can see this. I'm not gonna maybe try these videos right now. We can maybe just look at it for ourselves, but this was the journey of getting this ported over. But now the result is that we did it. The users, they can be away from you and you can go get them or go toward them, and you can at any time switch between the two modes, and the experience is coherent. So from shapes to dynamic programming was pretty nice in terms of being able to just match these experiences and make commentary about the user experience without writing a single line of code, so that when we do it, it's just what needs to happen.
Right. So guys, I mean, why don't we maybe give an overview about, and maybe try to explain this concept about moving in the virtual world and catching up with people, right? Because now I understand what you did and I understand the problem and the challenge. Maybe we can try it out in shapes. I can share my screen so that people can actually see and experience and hear also from you directly what were some of the design choice. What do you think? I still see some hesitation. So I'm like, are you sure? So let's go in. So let me get my headset on and let's see you guys go, and then we can keep. Oh, let me share my screen first. Okay. Back. Okay. I think it's this one. And let's see. Let me move this in the right place and start sharing. Hi, John.
Hello.
So let me Let me start casting. Let me make sure that this is all right. Okay. Stream. Share screen. Share screen. Right. So you guys now should see my setup here. And now I'm going here, and here is John. Hello, John. Hi, Sam. So this is a little bit the prototype. Now, John and Sam, they're actually in my little studio here upstairs. And at any moment, let's be honest, someone could open that door that you see there, come in. So if you're surprised, it's just a part of being in mixed reality, right? That's part of the deal. So this was indeed what you were telling us about, right? So I'm here, and let's imagine that I'm here in front. So this is, let's say, the simulated UI in front of the user, and then here is the stage system. So why don't you guys guide us through the storyline here?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you're looking at it right now, go to the next stage.
Right, I'm on stage 2 now.
So you're gonna see the users going over. I guess I'm in here. I don't know why I'm like looking at mixed reality. But now you're gonna select. If you notice, we have a ray in the front stage, and that's going on the ground. It's not doing anything. It's not gonna move around. So if you want to change where you are, you're gonna go over here to stage 2.
Correct.
Once you've clicked that, you're in stage 3, and you'll see that a subset of the floor is gonna appear. And I hope you can notice that it sort of fits in your room. The real Nanome floor is almost 3 times this large, which I can show in a moment. But and then we took a chance to we took this opportunity to upgrade the kind of user discoverability of teleporting itself. So this was a fun experience of improving the whole app at the same time as kind of bringing in this new feature. So if you go through and do this is a bit of an advanced ShapesXR prototype, because it's not enough to just use the stages. You'll be able to kind of, I guess it works fine. We were using a lot of the viewpoints system. So the viewpoints really make sure that it simulates where you're teleporting to each tile. That's the way that the Nanome system works. But if you scroll through, go ahead and click through the story of, we're gonna on slide 5, we're gonna click it over to slide 6, and we're selecting to go there. And once we get there, we've moved where the floor is underneath.
And that is shown by basically the molecule now being basically behind us at that point.
So if you do it again, if you do it again, then we're out, and we get to this point, which became something that was really a hard won victory. So go over now to slide 9. Okay, if you are getting too close to the edge of the floor, then you're gonna see this that we added of this out of bounds, which was another brain teaser, because you're still in your room, but if you look back, then you'll see you've moved away from the bound. So a VR user could be standing there, or another user could be standing there, and you need to have a way to reconcile that. So if you go over to slide 11, then you're going to see, if you turn around and you're going on slide 12, we want to give the users a way you can notice that
to quickly go back close to the molecule then.
Yeah, so I could go back, or I can just, I can commit. If I go all the way through the stages, I can commit and just stay here and then walk around in free space. So the result is that we merged our contexts, and then the users can still sort of pick where they want to go, where they want to go within the room context, but also keep it as compact as possible into their physical room at the same time. So this was a hard one. This was the result of many shapes prototypes to get it to sort of feel this way.
Yeah. And so basically also, so when I'm, let's say, far away, I'm on 13, then I select a new destination on 14, and then I'm not sure if I understand what is the stage 15. So it's like you are kind of like flipping the UI. Is that what is happening between
Yeah,
14
yeah. This
and
this was a very specific. That's, I guess that's like the secondary stage of talking through how much do we want to modify the way that menus are working and other core mechanics of Nano. And in this
15?
case, when you move away from something that's locked, it stays locked. So we need to unlock it to bring it to us. So
Uh-huh.
this is simulating that if you're going to move around in the space, it's still going to behave with the same other rule sets. So you can
Right.
see how there's different layers of context here that we had to track to make sure that it's going to make sense. And when and make certain decisions about how things were working. Like even at, we're on stage 18, the size of this, what we call the entry list, where you see the different aspects of these
Yes.
structures that are loaded, is that sizing was changed, but we didn't change
Right.
the
Right.
behavior of locking. So
Right.
we had to go through and do these kind of matrix of decisions of what are we going to change and what are we not going to, what are we not going to touch. So that was
Of course.
part of the
So,
thinking.
because basically you are moving away from the molecule, from the UI that stayed anchored to the molecule, so to say. So you're turning back. So this thing were anchored. So I need to be able to then either move back or in general also flip back the UI relative to me, but move it also closer because if it's far away, I cannot read it. And then I have in this case. So, and by the way, this is just an image that you guys have that you have imported from your own UI as reference, and then you say, haha, this is the kind of size, the kind of distance that I would say it's comfortable. And of course, these are all, I mean, it does sound like all things that you can discover and find and test, but you will discover it only when you are in a
Yeah,
mixed reality in some possible way. Because otherwise, you're
100%.
like, oh, damn it. Right. There is the
Yeah.
UI that got left there. Now, what do we do with it?
Yeah, no, totally. Like you do really need to experience mixed reality in order to make something successfully for it, so that you can kind of observe those edge cases. Yeah, I will just as a quick fun note is that this protein is from the protein databank, the RCSP
Uh-huh.
databank. You can download GLBs or OBJs of your favorite protein. Just enter the code and go to their 3D viewer and download it. So in Nanome, obviously, we can generate these and you can pull them in just by typing. You can load them in directly from the database. For here, we want to make sure we're always being as authentic as possible, because the whole point of Nanome is you're seeing this three-dimensional structure. So, even when it comes to prototyping, we make sure to do the right dimensionality. If it's flat, as an element, as a UI element, then it's flat here. If it's three-dimensional, then it's three-dimensional, for just as a
Right.
note
Right.
too of like it's important to make sure that your content is as close dimensionally as possible. If
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can
I
cheat
mean,
in other
Andy,
ways, that's
there
fine.
are a lot of ways in which you could say, hey, I snap a PNG image of a molecule and that does it. But especially when you're dealing like this and you're maybe at some point, because at some point, let's be honest, you're going to be here interacting and you says, and then you realize how, so what happens? Does my headset clip with the thing? If I get really big inside the molecule, then how am I going to interact? Where is the UI then positioned? So
Yeah,
there is a lot of these
this is an
aspects.
interesting. There is one interesting aspect just while we're talking about shapes
Mhm.
specifically is that you just did the shrink down paradigm, which is not something Nanome does. Nanome shrinks the structures and the environment always stays the same. So what we used
Uh-huh.
here to really make sure that we were simulating the software correctly, I took a huge advantage of the viewports,
Right.
um, and to also simulate like being forced to turn around by the functions of the software. So like it to correctly use this prototype, it's a relatively high fidelity prototype. There are some other things you want to do, like make sure you get in the viewpoint facing straight in your first orientation,
Right.
right? And then basically, if anyone doesn't know how to do that, it's in the viewpoints and screenshots, and you go into maybe you can show them how to do it. Get in the viewpoints, right? Then
Yeah.
what's really cool about that is I'll have you do it, Gabriel, for the audience. Maybe go to
Uh-huh.
like you can just go back over to like a slide one, because it's
Right.
pretty simple. So
Mhm.
you're looking forward, you get in the viewpoint, and then this is going to be in your view. Now turn somewhere and then hold that recenter button. Um,
Right.
And what's interesting is that shapes also has a different behavior to this than
Right.
what we ended up doing. So instead, you can get into the other viewport to simulate flipping around in a way that is what we wanted to do. Where
Right.
it's the opposite perspective, so that you're turning it around. So don't get too lost in doing this. This was part of, I just wanted to show this to you because this was a big part of how we were problem solving with the software.
Hacked.
We're kind of hacking it,
Yes.
but at the same time, I just view it as, hey, it's an affordance of Shapes XR. I can use it, to get the results done, because ultimately that's what we needed to do, was to make sure that we could validate our decision making of, all right, we think that it, when you push that button, it should reorient your position this way, or it should do, it's going to relatively move you that way, whatever. So without getting too deep in it, to get back into our stuff, please go download Nanome, right? And help.
Absolutely.
Is go out there and try it, and then see what we did, and you'll probably be able to reverse engineer. Oh, wow, I see what they're talking about.
And this is a very important thing that you're making. I think that the best way of actually is, you can see as many videos as you want of what other apps are doing. You need to download. You need to download and try. And again, there is Gravity Sketch is doing something different. You guys are doing something different. We are doing something different. RQ is doing something different. And then there are games indeed Cubism is doing something different. So everybody is trying to address this problem in very different way, right? So some maybe just have to deal with a desk because that is the place where this is going to be used. Maybe they're not worried about co-located experience, and it's totally fine. In the case of collaborative app, that is a completely different world. How does that gonna work? So I think I invite everybody that is actually testing and experimenting with this to dive in and indeed try out, download, because also many of these apps always have a free version that you can test and try. So I really absolutely, that is one of the core thing. So this is, you guys now have got a little bit of a taste of a pretty advanced prototype that was built by John after several iterations, and tells like a very streamlined story about a problem, how it's been solved. And I think it's really a great example of one of the mixed reality aspect and the challenges and the opportunity that lies behind. So let's go back. Let's see if maybe there is any question from the people from the audience. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Let me go here.
Back to Meetverse.
Back to the real. So this was a bit. I hope so. Let us know if you have questions, and maybe like the first follow up that I have is, how did people react it? So the moment that you unlocked it and you made it possible, how did your user, your clients, actually reacted to this new feature?
Extremely positively. We've kind of been building this VR application for so long. Everyone's kind of used to that enclosed space. But we originally, our first kind of prototypes we had we did have MR for Vario XR3, and that was you have to come to our office, you got to try it out, and then they were like, oh my gosh, this is the future. And then we had non-color pass-through, so black and white pass-through for the Quest 2, and then we finally could talk about the Quest Pro and then show people the Quest Pro, and they're mind blown. They're pretty much like, this is the future. Sign me up. And a lot of people who were apprehensive about VR, not really wanting to put something on their face. I had the Quest 2 on, but with the Quest Pro, you can take the horse blinders off and you have that periphery option plus color plaster. And that's just a lot more openness and space. You can see around. So a lot of people are more comfortable, especially for people who kind of were standoffish. They're like, oh yeah, no, I'll try it now. And so that was great. And so everyone who already liked VR was blown away by this. Everyone who was kind of apprehensive was just like, yes, I get it now. For all intents and purposes, a lot of our customers consider this AR, and a lot of them were waiting for AR to be here. And I'm like, well, have you tried MR? And they're like, oh, this is it. This is what I was talking about. I'm like, all right, well, buy our software then, please.
Exactly. Without the limitation of the field of view, because let's be honest, that is also another major thing. Of course, the quality of the color, the quality of the pass through, it's something that we know has to evolve and improve because they will never be comparable, at least for now, with the human eye, right? So that is one thing. So you get trade-off in, you get a full field of view, let's say pretty full, compared to, let's say, lower quality of what you see through. We do have a question from Sophie Chen. She asked, can you talk about the handoff process from design to engineering? Do you share with them the shapes prototype, or do you need to pass a Figma design for UI as well? How does that look?
Great question. I saw that, and I pulled up I have a little slide that sort of teases it.
Go ahead. I'm going
So we kind of came up with so there's kind of two ways that we use the Shapes XR. Was for that problem solving, like I was talking about, where I can invite engineers in, I can invite Sam in, I can invite random passersby in the office to help validate things. And that's the experiential part. But then when it does come up to that handoff, we've got a collection of rules and assets and configurations, for how these things are going to go. So what we ended up doing was creating, I strung out this stuff as Figma screens. So, you have the stages in Shapes XR, put them out as individual frames here in a Figma alongside their other supporting materials. So you have like a reference video of how it's, supposed to look, some interaction specific things like animations of the for other references that we can't do as easily in Shapes XR, too many keyframes. And then just lay out each one of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is a supplemental, and it's hard to see. I'm just gonna, it's a teaser, but inside of those is description of what at each state and stage, what needs to be going on more precisely, so that developers have a sense of, all right, when it's in this configuration, it needs to be doing this, and when it's in that, it needs to be doing this, and then package all that up along with the specific assets that are going to get added, in this case, to the software UI pieces. That ring, for example, is the floor's edge, the out of bound. So it's kind of a mixture of making stuff in Figma and then bringing it into Shapes, and then bringing Shapes back into Figma to finally kind of package it up as no questions, just like here's exactly what's supposed to be going on. So we are probably going to extend this, try and expand how it works, and partner it with kind of like a product requirement, a specific product requirements documentation. That's also kind of one-dimensional like discussion, because the benefit of the Shapes prototype can also be its weakness. And we'll just, as designers, we got to talk about different dimensions, right? The fact that it's so immersive can sometimes things can get lost. They don't experience every component of your prototype, because the prototype's pretty sophisticated, and this isn't even that complicated of a feature. It's conceptually complicated, but so we want to make sure as a designer, I'm blocking out every single thing that they need to pay attention to and implement, so that there's not, we're not miscommunicating. So that we did find that was kind of an essential final piece to really like make sure, and you can see how well it worked in that the final application looks, and the Shapes XR prototype, actually, when I was making these videos together, I was like, wait, which one's which? they got really close. And I think it's in part because we were able to just be so explicit and kind of work with the dimensionality as best as we can. So I would encourage teams to figure out what you need, to communicate what you did. That's the important part too, is that.
Right. And regarding communication, indeed, there is a good point that Lucas is asking. How do you guys share prototype internally and with customer? Do you put them in headset or share screen, or go straight to a polished build in Unity to be shared with stakeholders? How does that work?
Well, if we made a Shapes prototype, most of the time someone's going to go experience it. Only like documentation does it get compressed into 2D. At least that's what I always try to do. Since we do work these things a little bit along if it's purely two-dimensional, we might not need to go into Shapes. If it's two-dimensional and it's spatialized, we're going to have to go into Shapes because to test spatialization. And then if it's deeper features, then obviously we're going to be in Shapes. So the benefit is that we don't have to build we don't have to build anything. So it's the time to getting these things out. In theory, the other person just needs to have the Shapes application. We can share the the code, and they can just go right in there, and then we can talk about it. We are working on further refining our process for this, further weaving it in. So there will be a different answer that's fun about Unity, but maybe see you next time. It's not quite built out yet, but
you guys are always welcome any moment, so that is absolutely not a problem. So, but basically, to wrap up your question, is like, as much as possible, we try to get people in. That sounds like how I interpret it. Am I correct? And when that doesn't happen, how do you do it? Because there is another point, right? So people in the office, I suppose, have no problem. I'm in the team. Okay, let's go in. Suppose very flexible. That's part of your job. But let's say with someone that maybe can't, or maybe it's more reluctant, or maybe it's outside, doesn't have a headset. How else do you actually share what you have built, if not inviting them when it's not possible?
I want to tack on here, John. Yeah, I think there's a couple different phases of user validation, and I think that, like, do you build shapes XR prototypes for everything? And hopefully not. That's a lot of effort, and I don't you might not have your own, John. I'm very lucky, but ultimately, like, if you're doing flow diagrams and you're doing user validation on like Figma or FigJam flow diagrams, like, that's super helpful. Then you kind of can direct the time that you spend in shapes XR to be a lot more relevant. So I consider it like several different check-ins in user validation, and as you get closer to the pipe, to the end user, along that road, and more reflective of what the application would look like and changes to it, you will want to bring them in shapes. And I think there's kind of like, there's internal stakeholders in the sense that, like, we actually have scientists on payroll that are our team members that, like, actually have a horse in the race. We also have, like, consultants who, like, they aren't necessarily like a tier 1 pharma people, but, like, their background is tier 1 pharma, and they're also end users. So, like, we're able to leverage people, like, more in our immediate kind of distance to give them that opportunity to walk through. And so, like, we have an internal consultant who was like a VP of medicinal chemistry for like many years, and now he like we'll pull. He has a headset. We throw him in shapes, and it's just like, we're gonna swipe you through some stages and, like, tell us what you think. We've already gone through that FigJam flow and validated that general direction of what we're doing, but now it's like, how does it feel in the right context, a little bit more tied to our app, and, like, that's super helpful. And I definitely want to get more of our, like, customers to try out Shape XR, especially end users, but ultimately, like, there might be some limitations on their ability to access the software for now. Hopefully get easier. But in general, like, this is when, like, I'll just go on site with the headset at this point. Like, all right, I'm here. Puts headset on face.
Yeah, there is some of that. We do have a lot of hustle at Nanome with that. I mean, I can bring up just real quick, like, yes, technically you have the web view in shapes, you can show that. And also those Figmas, we found yes, you can show it, but it's also it's a risky thing to show someone the web view 2D on their screen share, where what Sam's talking about, if you can't get them to go in, you want to get them to do the validation and the core concept stuff, because they're not really going to be able to evaluate an XR application through screen share on Zoom or whatever. So, or in a web view, it's not really possible. So we just try to be careful. Can I please
record and repeat this endless what you just said? Because I mean, I haven't said it, but this is like how a lot of projects are currently validated, are currently funded. Sometimes it's not even anything moving on your screen. Sometimes it's just some pretty amazing slide with high polished.
Sure.
Right. So I mean, I just want to iterate and capture that, because you cannot fully validate and understand what is happening. Especially if you're not into it, if you're not, let's say, really in VR, you haven't tried many experiences. It's almost impossible. So that is a very good point.
Yeah, I think, like, double clicking on that, it's like how close can I make this to the real experience? So it's like, either I have to build it with my engineering team, which is very expensive, or we do a bunch of iterations in Shape XR and then throw them in there. So it's like, how close can you get to what the actuals will be, and then get that validation or tweak those final tweaks without having to build anything? Like, can I not write a line of code and still do all that work up front and kind of narrow it down? And then there's a different kind of exercise for when you actually build it and making sure you close the design versus engineering outcome gap. That's the next conversation.
Of course.
Just to really, like, quadruple tap on this, because it's what I do at Nanome, is like making sure that and it's what our customers know too. 3 dimensions is more dimensions than 2 dimensions. So I actually mathematically cannot see what's happening on the screen. it's not a roast of screens. I'm not saying screens are bad. I'm saying they're quantitatively less dimensions than the experience you're building. So at the bare minimum, you need to 6 degree of freedom. If you're building a 6 degree of freedom app, spatialize the stuff. And that's where the shapes comes in, is that that's what I mentioned it briefly, but I want to say it's important that we even do it for, we know it's going to be a 2D, it's like a menu or some kind of other flat panel, but there still can be a check of like how far away is it and how big does it need to be and stuff. And you can do that really quickly in Shapes. You don't have to spin up a whole APK to do Unity thing. It's already all done for you in Shapes, but it's really important to validate at the dimension that your user is going to use it. And then similarly, you're just going to get, I'm just telling you guys, you're going to get feedback that's really not helpful when you show somebody something that's spatialized flat, because they'll give you all this commentary about, well, I can't, this is intersect, I can't see this, that blocks this. And you're like, I know that's what it looks like in 2 dimensions, but it's okay. It's like, and that's a big thing for the Nanome customers that they get, is that chemistry is a it's stereo chemistry. It has a unique shape. And so on, Sam's background here in 2D, we're like, yeah, what is this thing? But once you see it inside Nanome, then you're able to, oh wow, that ligand is back there in a pocket, and there's actually depth coming off here and there, and it all suddenly makes sense. When on the 2D, it's really confusing and overwhelming. So it's just important, and it's actually not overwhelming at all. You're like, oh, it's just right there. So it's just important to make sure you use the right dimension for your dimensional project. Thank you.
And so, guys, time is running out. So I do have another question for you, and that is: so would you recommend other teams to port their app to mixed reality? And if so, when and when not? Right? I mean, what's your take after this journey of being one of the launch app on a MetaQuest Pro?
I mean, the always a nuanced answer of like, it depends. Like I think that there's a lot of applications where like VR will probably continue to reign, right? Like when I'm playing Population 1, I don't want it in mixed reality. Like I want it full immersive VR. Whereas like some applications are like almost MR, AR first. But ultimately, I do think that there's a usability boost that I know John wants to probably talk about that too. Like just the apprehensiveness some people like actually getting in the headset. Like people will be more inclined to try application if there's an option for like more MR than just like full enclosed VR, similar to like a wide range of locomotion options that are on the market right now. So it's, and comfort vignettes. So, that ultimately kind of comes down to the use case. Some are better than others, but in general, like, I would say that if you can be both, I think a majority of applications will probably have that option. You really got to think from the ground up these things and not like build the application for 5 years and then port it over.
That's a good point. It's a lot harder if you're trying to merge these later, like you built a VR application and you're trying to. That's definitely what I learned, because I have a lot of my background is getting to start on mixed reality types of things. So yeah, I mean, however, I'm going to echo the sort of accessibility victory that you can get, where just consider that a lot of these headsets have some kind of mechanism where you can switch it to pass through, but then they're out of your experience and it's kind of flow breaking. So this is one of those things of, as XR designers, we have to kind of wrestle with the manufacturers themselves. If you add MR into your app and you give them that option, they're still in your app. And then you're also giving them that accessibility aspect. So like, you can do it in different ways. A gravity sketch type of thing is pulling it on and off. We're turning it on and off because it's more something you do in different settings, but maybe you do it frequently. Shapes, you can turn it on and off here. But the point being is you can kind of get it's a nice thing to give. And then it does, like, just for the sake of it, just to help the user, maybe if they've been in virtual for too long, especially for creation things, they can turn it back off and say, well, where am I? Okay, here I go. But it also opens you up, like, to bring it full circle, where once you have the capability in there, then your app is now open. This VR app of Nanome has now opened itself up to, okay, co-location is like a next step for it, because we went through the pathway of doing this. So it's kind of like an enabling affordance. Once you unlock that, then you have this whole other field that you need to go and understand how that's going to benefit your application or not. So, I mean, definitely in surveying the other work, I'll conclude by saying, please don't just have it be a turn on and then it's kind of like doesn't work and there's content stuck inside my wall. Like, you do need to think about it, and it's not trivial to think about, but luckily we have Shapes XR, so it's possible.
So I am almost tempted to close it here, but I do have
Well done.
one last question, and that is about you guys, because I think that it's about, let's say, our heroes in a way, like people that embrace, people that believe, people that innovate. So I'm really curious to end up this with one last question, that is, what's next for Nano? What's at the horizon? What can we expect in 2024 from you guys?
So from the product and engineering side of things, like, one of the biggest undertakings we have right now is building the second generation of our product. So for the first couple of years was all focused around like this hypothesis of like, what about collaborative molecular design in spatial computing? Like, what would that look like? And we kind of rapidly build in the direction the customer kind of tells you. And we've collected a lot of insights, and now we have a lot of internal scientific knowledge, and we have a lot of really smart people on the team. And we have tools like an XR design tool pipeline is just like 10x, 100x what it was when we first started. So when we're building from the ground up, kind of our second generation product, which hopefully is going to be coming out this year for the first iteration, and we'll be kind of iterating from that. So it's going to be a lot more focused on the next generation of hardware that's available. Like I said, when we first started out, it was all base stations and low res, and now we have a very different world we live in. And so I'm pretty stoked for what's going to come, and our end users are ultimately going to be the ones that are most benefiting from this as we like triple tap directly into what enables them to generate the most value and ultimately accelerate science forward.
Awesome, guys. I really want to thank you for everything, for the journey, for believing in what was at the beginning kind of like buggy pass through, but then kind of like evolving to something that really enabled you to kind of like troubleshoot your problem. So this is a very inspiring story, and I invite everybody to check the case study that everybody's going to get via email at the end of this. But just so if you want to know more, of course, I'm pretty more than sure that the guys will be happy to answer your questions. So we do have one last comment from Igor. Impressive work. I can't even imagine how much work went into getting to this point. Good stuff. I think that this is like a good ending. So Sam, Sam, John, thank you very, very much. And it's a pleasure to have you. And who knows, maybe soon enough, we're going to get another occasion with more learning for people. Yes, Sam, you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to give a huge shout out to the Nanome product and engineering team as well for all their work over the years. It wasn't just us alone, it's a whole team.
Absolutely.
Standing on the shoulders of giants. Standing on
yeah, definitely.
You know what's fun is that some of those people are the ones that usually don't want to be in these circumstances, right? They want to be, no, let me just go. So next time, maybe when we're organizing, I think we should also get them to kind of like get their side, their view of things, so that they can also share, because there is indeed a lot of masterful engineering that goes behind this project. So absolutely. Guys, thank you very much. Thanks to everybody that was here with us this evening today, and it was a great pleasure. Anybody that asked question, stay with us, follow us on LinkedIn, on social network, and in general, try out Shapes, because indeed there are great troubleshooting that can be done. Bye guys.
Bye.